Alright, welcome to this channel. Now today I'm going to show you how to build one of those multi-purpose containers. Now this project really just should take half a day max, and it's a great way to use up some of the scrap wood that is piling up in every woodworker's shop. Now you might be wondering what exactly to do with this thing, and I will give you a couple examples in this video later on, but first let's get into the building process. Part of the container is made out of these strips that are 5.5 inch long, 1/2 inch wide and 3/8 of an inch high. And we need 59 of these. We also need one strip that has almost the same measurements, except that this one is 5/8 of an inch wide. I call this one a key strip, and I will explain later why. We also need this 1/4 inch thick front panel and this 1/2 inch thick back panel. I went through my scrap pile and I found those chunks of birch. I ran them all through my planer off camera until they all had the thickness of 1/2 inch. Now it doesn't matter what kind of wood you use, that's really up to your taste or whatever you have available. And you also don't have to have a planer. What really matters is that you end up with a whole bunch of strips that are 1/2 inch by 3/8 of an inch. And that could be done only by using a table saw. I'm using a 3/16 round over bit on my router to break the sharp edges along one of the 1/2 inch wide sides. It is much easier to do this now versus later with those long pieces. It helps to keep your fingers away from the router bit. I think this is definitely one of those cases where it is worth it to set up a stop block, unless of course you enjoy measuring 5.5 inch 60 times in a row. I mean, that's okay too. Alright, hang on, this is not me grinding down my fingernails on a belt sander. This is me giving all those strips a quick sanding while having the camera in the worst spot possible. However, the sanding helps to remove some of the burn marks from the table saw and the fine splinters on the edges. Don't forget to cut that one key strip that is 5/8 of an inch wide. Alright, now let's take a look at the front panel. A 1/4 inch thickness is not a lot, that's why I recommend to use Baltic birch plywood for this, or at least good quality plywood with as many veneer layers as possible. Now the panel is 11 7/8 of an inch wide and 5.5 inch tall, which means the radius on the left and right side is 2 3/4 of an inch. Now the edge at the opening is only 1/2 inch thick, and to get those lines I just reduced the radius of the right circle to 2 1/4 of an inch, and then I measured 5.5 inch along the horizontal center line from the right to get the center of the second circle with the same radius. I know this sounded a bit complicated, those were a lot of numbers, but it really just takes 2 minutes to draw the lines on your workpiece and then you can cut it all out. Alright, I got all my parts cut out. Now the most difficult and time-consuming part is about to happen, the glue up. To prepare for this, I cut pieces of scrap foam that I will use as temporary spacers between the two panels. You could use some scrap wood for this as well. It will be just a bit more tricky to remove later on, but not impossible. To keep them in place, I use double-sided tape on all 4 pieces. Now all of this will make sense in a second. We also need a roll of 3/8 of an inch wide painter's tape. I didn't have any, so I decided to cut a much wider roll down to size on a table saw. It did work, but this was really not a good idea. It didn't feel very safe, to be honest, and it made a mess. If you think about it, half of the roll is basically just glue, so the blade was all gummed up and had to be cleaned. I simply should have prepared myself better and buy a roll beforehand. I will leave a link in the video description in case you have trouble finding this size, so you don't feel tempted to do what I did. Alright, now let's get to business. First I need to align the two panels. I'm taking advantage here of the table saw fence and a square to make sure they are absolutely parallel to each other. I use 4 spacers to guarantee that the distance between the 2 panels is equal throughout the whole piece. Now this is how it should look like when you're done. And definitely double check everything for squareness. Now you can start gluing all the wood strips in place. Pay extra attention to the very first one. Once again, make sure it's all square. I'm not using pin nails or clamps for this. The painter's tape will make sure it stays in place. That way I don't have a million ugly pinholes to deal with. Now work your way around and repeat the process, and don't use too much glue. It's a pain in the butt to clean up excess glue squeezing out between the strips. This will take about half an hour, and after placing 59 of those, you will be left with one small gap. Now this is where the key piece comes into play. I built already a couple of those, and each time the width of the last gap was different, which makes sense with so many pieces in place. I mean, if you set your table saw fence even just a hair off your desired measurement, this will add up, or even just by sanding the strips unevenly, you can change the width of the gap. So this is why the key strip is a little oversized in width. That ensures you have enough material to custom fit this last piece, so it fits perfectly just like a key. I used this quick dry wood glue. It only takes 10 minutes to dry. I gave it half an hour just to be on the safe side, and then I started to remove the foam blocks and all the tape. Next I gave the edges here a quick sanding. The point of this is to expose the tiny gaps. You will get them no matter how clean you work. I mean, after all, you glue something flat on a curved surface. It's easy enough to deal with though. I just mixed wood glue with some dust from the sander and filled them all up. I want to be able to hang this up on a wall vertically as well as horizontal, so I need to drill 2 holes in the back panel. I marked the center line, checked on which side the opening is, and measured 1 1/4 inch from that side, and I made another mark at 7 1/4 inch. I could have done this a bit easier before the glue up, but I accidentally flipped the back panel around on my first piece, and then the holes didn't align with the opening. The drawback though about doing this now is the hole will tear out and look a bit messy on the inner side, but that can be easily fixed with a countersink bit. Now I could give everything from all sides a really good sanding with 80 grit sandpaper, and then I used the same 3/8 inch roundover bit from earlier to break the sharp edge. As you can see, end grain really likes to leave burn marks, especially if the router bit is not deadly sharp. But another round of thorough sanding with 120 grit sandpaper will take care of that. It is already time for the finishing touches. It's up to you what kind of finish you would like to use. Everything kind of works here. I went with the good old boiled linseed oil on this one, and it came out really nice. I definitely recommend though a brush. It makes it so much easier to get in between the strips. I gave this 2 coats on the outside and the inside. The last step is optional, but worth it in my opinion. I like to cover the edge with this black rubber edge trim. And if you follow the Tiny House Boat series on this channel, then you know that I used this already a couple times to cover the edge of plywood. It creates a really clean and unique look. I will put a link in the video description. Be aware though, this stuff is not cheap. Alright, well, we are at the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and as promised, I will give you now a couple of examples for what you can use this container for.